Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 688 for the 12th of December 2021. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia, where it's still not summer yet. I don't know. Where's summer? Where are you? It's a bit cool, it's a bit grey, it's a bit cloudy. Actually, I don't mind too much. I prefer winter over summer, but still, come on. It's got to be here somewhere. Coming up on this week's show, we're going to kick off with an interview with Michael Marshall from the Good Thinking Society in the UK, editor of the UK version of The Skeptic. He's going to tell us about the recent Ockham Awards. The Ockham Awards and the Rusty Razor. Sort of the cheers and jeers for people in the scientific community and for people who deserve a bit of a jeer every now and then. The Rusty Razor is sort of like our Bent Spoon Award here in Australia, or in times past the Pegasus Prize from James Randi. Find out more with Michael Marshall. Then after that, it's the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, a bit of a different Book of Tim this week. Tim calls in to tell us what's in the latest issue of the Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, and upcoming in the issue, which you can subscribe and get right now via email, is the report, the official report on the Great Australian Prediction Projects. Also in the magazine, vaccination myths, including the Nuremberg Code. Some anti-vaxxers are wailing and whining and whinging about their rights with the in respect to the Nuremberg Code, and the magazine covers that. It looks at the 10th anniversary of the Friends of Science and Medicine and how you can subscribe. All that coming up with Tim Mendham in the Book of Tim. Then to round off the show, the Trove segment this week looks at seances. And quite frankly, it's one of the more bizarre troves I've ever recorded. You'll find out why. Mysterious seances, contacting the dead. And somewhere in this week's show, I think the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet might fly by. Well, that's enough from me at the moment. So, what's that? Maud. It's Maud the cat. What do you want? Do you want to say hello to the Skeptic Zone listeners? Come here. Come on. Oh, she's somehow got into the studio. That's a microphone. Do you want to say hello? Isn't it typical? You sit there and you mouth your breakfast and you mouth your dinner, but when you have a chance to be famous on the internet, say something. All right, thank you, go. Well, now it's time for me to run downstairs. And what will I have this week? I'll have some rice, some nice spicy rice, and dream of happy times by the ocean, something like that. That would be nice. Well, I'm doing that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And joining me now, it's our old friend, the director of the Good Thinking Society, all the way from Liverpool in the UK. It's Michael Marshall. Hi, Marsh.
Hi, Richard. Hi. Nice to catch up. It's been a little while.
It has been a little while. I think you really are an honorary reporter on the Skeptic Zone, because over the years and years and years, if people look back over the archives, they can see that you pop up at least once, twice, maybe 3 times a year to give your reports from the UK. And I contacted you because I woke up just in time to miss the announcements, because they were done at some crazy hour in Australia, of the Ockham Awards. Now, before we get to the Ockham Awards for this year, can you give our listeners a little bit of background about what the Ockham Awards are all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Ockham Awards are awards given out by The Skeptic magazine in the UK, which I've been the editor now for just over a year. And it's actually the 10th year of the Ockhams. They were given out at the first ever QED in 2011. And it's our chance to recognise people who've made an outstanding contribution to skepticism in the last year in particular and kind of overall. So over the years, we've had different types of awards. We've had awards for podcasts and videos and things. But since we've relaunched the magazine in September, what we try and do is we try and essentially pick out an individual or group or organisation that's been outstanding for skeptical activism over the past 12 months. And then we have our flip side of that, which is our Rusty Razor Award, which is for the worst pseudoscience of the previous 12 months. So very much like the Ben Spoon Award, it's our opportunity to shine a spotlight on some peddlers of pseudoscience who really deserve a little bit of light shone on them.
Yeah, it's giving out cheers to the people who deserve cheers and jeers to the people who deserve a good jeer. Before we get to the I don't know how you describe it, the interesting one of the Rusty Razor, which is your equivalent to our Ben Spoon. Who are the people who you single out this year to cheer on?
Well, we had quite a lot of nominations because all of our awards are nominated for by the skeptical community, and then the panel from The Skeptic chooses from among those nominations. And we had lots of really, really strong nominations of people who'd spend a lot of their time looking at kind of COVID misinformation and the various things that have come up around there. But in the end, we decided the person to give the award to would be Dr. Elizabeth Bick. And I don't know if you know Elizabeth Bick's work, but she's absolutely prolific in identifying and exposing research fraud. So looking through academic papers to sort of forensically examine the imagery and the data in order to point out where there's been image manipulation, where there's been plagiarism, where there's been data faked, and where this is actually going into the scientific record, why these are published papers. Because what's really important is the work that we do is trying to sort of keep pseudoscience out of society and sort of promote science. And what's really impressive about the Elizabeth's work is that she's cleaning up science. So the thing that we're pointing at and saying this is how it should be, she's making sure that it's getting better and that it's improving, and that people can't get away with passing fraudulent research off as legitimate. Yeah. So she's, and I think in the last 8 years, she's uncovered something like 5,000 papers, many of which she's been able to push and actually have them retracted and removed from the record. So she's been incredibly prolific, and she spends a lot of time teaching people the methods that she uses to identify the fraud and the mistaken data and various other flaws in the way that data is presented and published.
Yeah. What a worthy winner, because she's doing an invaluable job. Because that's what science is all about. It's about housekeeping. It's about being sure. It's double checking and pointing out when there are errors and frauds and all the rest of it within our own community. It's very important.
Yeah, I mean, we always say that science is, it needs to be, and it aims and strives to be self-correcting. And Dr. Elizabeth Bick is part of that self-correction mechanism of science. It's something that she sort of took on for herself as an interest, and then turned it into something of a kind of, I'm not sure it's a full-time project, but certainly a project she invests a huge amount of time and energy into. And she's having quite a significant amount of impact. So that's what we look for, really, when we look for a recipient of our awards. We look for what is their reach, what is their impact, and what is their relevance. So how far is their work spreading, and what effect is it having on the world? Is it making a real world difference? And in the case of this year's recipient, we can say it absolutely is. And even in the last a year or two, she's received quite a lot of negative attention for her work from the people whose work she's pointing out, people whose fraudulent or mistaken or faked data she's highlighting. And she actually was threatened with legal action from the recipient of last year's Rusty Razor Award, Professor Didier Raut, for his work promoting hydroxychloroquine. So it all kind of comes back around and links all back up.
Wow, that's fascinating. You're right. It's like the never-ending loop.
And so while Elizabeth Bick was the recipient of the award. There were other honorary mentions that really sort of ran her close to the award. So your very own Gid MK from Australian Skeptics was one of our strong nominations for his work in especially around ivermectin and the various studies that have turned out to be fraudulent there. And another person who got a really strong nomination was the BBC's misinformation reporter Mariana Spring.
Oh yeah,
she's done a Skeptics in the Pub talk for us, and she spent the entire pandemic delving into some of the worst places online to understand what are people saying in the anti-vax movement, what are people saying in the kind of the online conspiracy theory ecosystem, and in doing so, especially because she's a female journalist, she gets a huge amount of flack, a huge amount of abuse, a huge amount of quite threatening communications her way, and she continues to do fantastic work. So she was a really strong nomination too, but in the end we decided that Elizabeth Bick would be the winner for 2021.
All right, now let's get to the Rusty Razor.
So this year's Rusty Razor, again, because we've had such a year and COVID has dominated it, the nominations were dominated by people who'd spread COVID misinformation. And so there were people like Jair Bolsonaro from Brazil. There was Joe Rogan, the biggest podcaster in the world, for saying that he can cure COVID. He was able to treat his COVID with a range of nonsensical treatments. People like Brett Weinstein, who's promoted those other kind of misinformation and treatments around COVID. But in the end, what we thought was all those different people. Jair Bolsonaro might be the head of a large country, but he doesn't have scientific credibility. And Joe Rogan's got 11 million listeners, but he doesn't have any. He doesn't have the conferred legitimacy of a scientific background. And so what we thought with the anti-vax movement and the way that anti-vax movement has been so energized by some of the sorts of misinformation, it's the people who present themselves as whistleblowers from a formal scientific background that I think provide the most most effective ammunition. And so for that reason, the person that we've given the Rusty Razor to this year is Dr. Mike Eden, who was a research scientist who's vice president of Pfizer's allergies and respiratory division at one point. And then he left Pfizer in 2011, and subsequently he's been a relentless source of COVID misinformation. So right at the start of the pandemic, he was saying, I worked for Pfizer, I know my way around respiratory diseases, and I can tell you that masks have got no effect on COVID transmission, that lockdowns will do nothing to slow transmission, that there's no such thing as an asymptomatic spread of disease in this way. In October 2020, he wrote an article for the Daily Mail where he predicted there would be no second wave of COVID-19 infections or deaths, that the deaths would just fizzle out in October 2020. And since then in the UK, a further 100,000 people have died. And at no point has he changed his tune. So once the vaccines became available, it all became about how the vaccines weren't safe. The vaccines didn't work, how we shouldn't take them. He even tried to get the trials for vaccines halted because he claimed that the vaccines would cause infertility in women. And he said at the time he had no scientific evidence to suggest that was the case. But that claim went viral on social media. And I think there was a study in the US that found 13% of unvaccinated people had heard of his claim and believed his claim about fertility. And something like 7% of all people in the UK had heard the same thing. So this is someone who uses the white coat of his former career to push misinformation at every stage about the pandemic. And when you spend a lot of time looking at the anti-vaccine movement and hanging around in anti-vaccine Telegram spaces like I do, his name comes up relentlessly as, well, this Pfizer whistleblower, this guy worked for Pfizer, this guy worked in allergies and respiratory disease, so he knows what he's talking about and he can blow the whistle on all of this, when in fact what he's spreading is the complete opposite of scientifically valid. It's misinformation designed to scaremonger. He said that COVID-19 vaccines were 50 times more likely to kill children than COVID was, which is not true at all. He said that the vaccines are part of a serious attempt at mass depopulation and that they're a deliberate execution, potentially of billions of people. This is the most blatant of pseudosciences from someone that people take seriously because of where he used to work and what he used to do.
Well, there's nothing new under the sun, Marsh. In 2004, from memory, 2003, 2004, a friend and I attended a public talk here given by the Australian Vaccination Network, and one of the speakers said, and we have it recorded, that the World Health Organization put Hitler and Stalin in the shade, and vaccines are a deliberate attempt to depopulate Africa. Nothing's new. Nothing's new.
I was saying that was, a decade ago, 15 years ago, and the world population hasn't been decimated. We haven't all died off. It's funny. I had exactly the same. I had a similar conversation on a recent Be Reasonable with one of the people who's again really prolific in spreading misinformation online. A guy called Mark Steele, and he was saying that when I spoke to him in July, he was absolutely certain that between the vaccines and the 5G, the government would kill 70% of people in the UK by Christmas. It's nearly Christmas, and unless there is a mass die-off next week, in which case I will hold my hands up and apologise, he's going to be wrong, and it's not like he's going to say, oh, I was wrong about that.
No, they never do.
He'll just move on to his next claim and never acknowledge that what he said never came to pass. And I'm sure the same's true of the Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And there are people here in this country who are convinced that everybody who's had the vaccine, like myself, will, within the next year, die because it'll kill us, and all the unvaccinated people who they're calling purebloods, I think, at the moment, will be running around saying there, I told you so, and all the rest of it. We live in interesting times. We really do.
Absolutely. And I can understand why people think that. It's all very scary, what's been happening. It's all very uncertain. We've never gone through something like this before. And when your life suddenly gets upended by something as dramatic as all of this, it's very tempting and seductive to turn to these kind of claims that say they can make sense of what's going on and say that there's a very clear plan to it all, and you don't have to do that dramatic intervention of having a vaccine and all those type of things because it's actually going to be fine. I can see why some people would be seduced by that and would think, actually, yes, that makes sense because I don't want this to be true, and so I'm going to believe the person saying that it isn't true.
Yeah, well, I don't want it to be true either, but there you go. Marsh, where can people go online to find out more about the good thinking and the skeptic from the UK?
Yeah, sure. So for the Skeptic, you go to skeptic.org.uk, and we've been publishing 3 or 4 stories a week for more than a year now of just from all around the sort of skeptical community, lots of different articles from lots of different perspectives on a huge range of topics. And if you want to find out the work that I'm doing at the Good Thinking Society, you can go to goodthinkingsociety.org.
Excellent. And folks, just after this interview, I'll play the promotion for that fascinating, endlessly fascinating podcast from Marsh called Be Reasonable. Marsh, thank you once again. I hope you and your family have a happy Christmas coming up and a brighter new year. Let's hope for a brighter new year.
Thanks very much, Richard. And you too. I hope you have a fantastic Christmas too. And let's hope that 2022 sees at some point a return to relative normality. That's what all of us are hoping for, I think.
Indeed we are. Thank you.
Thanks. Be Reasonable is the interview show from the Merseyside Skeptics Society, where each month I speak to someone about their fringe beliefs. Over the years, I've spoken to psychics, UFO believers, moon landing deniers, flat earthers, hollow earthers, and all manner of unusual conspiracy theorists. But I've also talked to AIDS denialists, white supremacists, gay conversion therapists. I even interviewed Jim Humble, the inventor of Miracle Mineral Supplement, a form of industrial bleach that he and his followers use to treat cancer and HIV. This isn't a debate show, and my aim isn't to win an argument. But when we listen to how people promote and justify the ideas that we disagree with, even the dangerous ones, I think we become much more effective at countering those ideas. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, look for Be Reasonable on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that podcasts live.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. And joining me now for the Book of Tim this week, it's not Tim reading from the Book of Tim, well, sort of is. Tim Mendham, you're going to be telling us about the upcoming issue of the Skeptic magazine. Hello.
Hello. Well, the December issue of the magazine is just out, and this completes 41 years of our magazine.
That's impressive.
So it's impressive, isn't it? Yeah, we're the second oldest English language skeptical publication in the world. So, yeah, and we're still going strong, which is great. But every year, about this time, of course, we sum up our convention, which we just had, as you have told the listeners, in November. And so we got a coverage there, looking at all the presentations and that sort of thing. And there's a whole lot of them. It was very good, wide range of topics, etc. So, but one of those presentations was from someone named Richard Saunders. I don't know if you know him. You know him?
No.
Okay, no. He's a bit of a strange character anyway, so probably advisable. But of course, Richard spoke about briefly, well, over half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever it was, about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. Yeah. And that was great, and that was interesting. And he sort of, gave the denouement, sort of exposing the fact that psychics in Australia over this 20-year period only got 11% of their predictions right. So, but Richard has written a much longer report.
Has he?
He has. Mm-hmm. It is extensive. It is a learned paper, in fact, that we are running in the magazine. It takes up a fair percentage of the magazine too, I should add. But this is a pretty much important document because it's one of the biggest projects Richard, of course, has done in quite a long time, actually, and I think it's one that we think will be closely referenced by a lot of people. In fact, I've already been approached by Americans for information on it, so that I know. What more do you need?
What more do you need? Approached by Americans
to actually cover the details. So, the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. The results are all in. And in this article that's in the magazine, it's got lists all the psychics and how successful or unsuccessful they've been. Gives all the background on how it was done. It gives the results. It also preempts any predicted complaints that there might be about the process and the final results. And Richard, in his clever way, has written a series of responses to questions that haven't been asked yet. So he's obviously psychic.
Just like our friend Maynard would do. Now, the thing is, I did that because as I was writing the report, or Richard, I should say, that strange character, writing the report, I thought, what are they going to say when this is all finished? And I could see where it was heading. So I tried to preempt. I tried to predict what the complaints would be.
And you did very well, I think, actually, because I think you have covered very much everything that I could think of, all the usual culprits. Skeptics are biased. What's the point? We're just here for entertainment and blah blah blah, all those sort of things, and they have all been responded to in this article, along with everything else. So it's a detailed report, and because it is so important, and we think it is important, and we've had those comments from other people as well, on a global scale, even for a flat Earth, across the whole flat Earth, that we have made this report public, and people can go onto our website, skeptics.com.au, and click on the magazine link, and you can actually download this entire article, which is unusual for us because we don't normally put such a long article as our sample. Whenever an issue comes out, a magazine comes out, we put a sample, almost like a teaser, right, article, to show, along with the contents page, to show the sort of stuff that we have. And this is a pretty major piece, so we've made that the sample article, and so that everyone can get to look at it. It can be a reference. People can link to it and relink to it, etc. Because it is huge. It is a really important thing. But of course, that's not the only thing in the magazine, I should add.
Oh, really? You mean there's other things in the magazine?
There are other things even better.
Oh, heavens.
No, we have a look at a number of things. There's a couple of myths that keep cropping up about vaccination, and supposedly referring to historical issues. One is the vaccination compensation scheme, that all these people are being compensated for vaccination damage.
Yes, I've heard about that. Yeah, billions of dollars or something.
Billions of dollars. So we're actually looking at one of those, the American scheme, of course, which is probably the most widely quoted. We look at that and look behind the actual sort of claims, etc., about what's being done there and the reality of the compensation scheme. Now, people are compensated, right? Bad things do happen after vaccinations for some people, and they are looked after. But this actually, the issue is sort of somewhat exaggerated. The other one that's exaggerated and raised is the Nuremberg Code.
Oh, right? Yes, I've heard that one, yeah.
Yeah, the Nuremberg Code is sort of states that after the Second World War, during all the Nuremberg trials, a whole bunch of 20, I think, doctors were put on trial for the crimes that they committed, the horrific crimes they committed in experimentation on people. So this Nuremberg Code was written shortly after that and lays out rules for how you can do, or should you even, do experiments on people. Now, a lot of the people I regard, and that Nuremberg Code has been adapted and changed at least 5 times, and there's been other variations put forward as well. And basically saying you can't experiment on people, unless they agree to it for a start. So the anti-vaxxers are saying that vaccination is an experiment and that therefore it goes against the Nuremberg Code. Well, it doesn't. Right? The Nuremberg Code does not cover vaccination. Vaccination is not an experiment, and certainly when it's being put out against, in the mass public. So, there's these 2 myths: vaccination compensation and vaccination Nuremberg.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that, because that's one thing that has been put to me more than once, and I haven't had a quick, ready answer, so I will look forward to reading that in the magazine.
And this actually lists the codes themselves. And that's right, because this article by Richard on the project is a reference work. I wanted these 2 to be in there as well, and they are reference works. So when these topics crop up, you can look at the article and say, here, whack it down, cop your eyes on that one. And we get a few other articles. Of course, it's also the 10th anniversary of the Friends of Science in Medicine, which is a major lobby group which is has been campaigning for 10 years against sort of pseudoscience in universities, and largely in universities, etc. So they've been active for 10 years now, and we have supported them. The Australian Skeptics has supported them in the past. So we're very happy to see their growth and their continued existence. And apart from that, all the usual stories, the usual sort of candidates and things, like the interesting story of Arthur Conan Doyle, Harry Houdini, and dinosaurs.
Oh, that sounds good.
It is good.
It's amazing, in all the research I've been doing for the Skeptic Zone, reading Trove and the historical archives, how often Sir Arthur Conan Doyle pops up. He was a busy guy. He really was.
Very busy guy. He wrote books,
I don't know how he had the time between looking for monsters and ghosts and fairies at the bottom. Yes.
Yeah, I know. He's a busy chap, but I don't know what a nice sort of person. He obviously had a few tricks up his sleeve. So that's what this little article, which is in that what goes around section that I often cover in the book of Tim.
Yes.
So it's one of those, and it's a weird little story.
Excellent. I look forward to reading that too. And I'm sure our listeners will look forward to reading everything in the magazine. How can they take advantage of reading the magazine? What must they do?
Well, of course, with this particular magazine being one of the 4 most recent issues, they will have to subscribe, right? Issues older than that we put up on our website for free, right? But any of the most recent 4 issues we keep for our subscribers. They can subscribe by going to skeptics.com.au and then going to our shop. Yeah. And there you'll find a little thing called a link, right? It's a little picture. I think that's an icon, they call it, right? And then you can click on that and subscribe to the magazine.
Keeping up with the times, Tim. And I know, of course, if people subscribe, they will get the magazine almost straight away because they can opt to have it digitally. Then it's emailed to them and they can enjoy it on their computer or what I do is I enjoy it on my iPad. I just read it straight off the iPad. It makes a great ebook. Or they can get the physical copy sent to them so they can read it where maybe they don't have access to a computer or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. You can stand on it and change light bulbs.
You can. It's of use, folks. The Skeptic magazine is of use. Tim, thank you very much for that update. There you are, folks. Run to skeptics.com.au, subscribe to the magazine, and join the thousands of others who enjoy every quarter their dose of skepticism from Australian skeptics. Tim, I look forward to catching up with you soon in person to record more of the real Book of Tim. But for now, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Hey, Adrian.
Hi, Susan. Out for some shopping, eh?
Yep, I'm stocking up on this imitation maple syrup from Australia.
Imitation? Imitation? No. You need to buy the real thing from Canada.
But I saw the TV commercial and it said that noted pancake eating expert Richard Saunders says it's the best maple syrup money can buy, and 60% of people preferred it in a blind taste test. Everyone knows it's the best.
Oh, come on, Susan. You know better than that. That's the argument from authority.
It is?
Or is it the argument from popularity? It might be another logical fallacy. I'm not sure.
Really, if only we had a way of finding out.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my, it's the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
Yes, that's right. But how did you know who I am?
I listened to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Also, didn't you used to be the tooth fairy?
Oh, yes. I remember you. I'll never forget your left upper lateral incisor. Would you like it back?
No, it's okay. You keep it.
Hey, skeptical fairy godmother angel, what are you doing here in the supermarket?
I've come to tell you that you can find out about 40 different logical fallacies on YouTube in one handy location. Listen to each one to hear an explanation and examples of how they might be used.
Oh.
Just go to tinyurl.com/logicalzone and you'll find all the logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma with handy time codes to get to the exact one you want.
Who is Michelle Bickersma?
Oh, just a friend of mine.
tinyurl.com/logicalzone. Thank you, skeptical fairy godmother angel. I guess you'll disappear in a puff of smoke and thunder now, eh?
Not quite yet. I have a bit of shopping to do. Susan,
Yes?
where do I find the Australian maple syrup?
What? No. Come with me, so-called skeptical fairy. This is real maple syrup from Canada. Made with real maple.
Time once again to look into the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource used around the world for digitised Australian newspapers, gazettes, magazines, periodicals, journals, diaries, menus, all sorts of things. At your disposal at trove.nla.gov.au. Put in your search criteria and you never know what you'll find. Now, lately we've been looking at quackery, alternative medicine, that sort of thing. Today we're going to go back to a classic of skepticism, that is looking at things like mediums and seances and contacting the dead. And our first entry comes from The Sun, which was published here in Sydney, Australia. And this is from Wednesday, the 30th of April, 1952. Devices produce fake ghosts. Amazing devices to produce fake ghosts, spirit world messages, voices and sounds have been uncovered by the Universal Council of Psychic Research. With this visual evidence, the Council has launched an all-out war on fake mediums who have been taking millions of pounds from the public. How these dishonest mediums work is pictorially represented in the new issue of Pix, P-I-X, out today. Other vivid stories and pictures are new electric treatment for disease, college girl bullfighter, more USA air bases around Russia, life of a sparring partner, search for £10,000 stamp in Australia, rotary mast in new yacht design, Zanzibar travelogue, the honey bear nature story. Also film stars at home, world's news and pictures, pictorial film reviews, Joffrey's cartoons. To avoid disappointment, order your picks early this week. Price £1 shilling everywhere. It might be worth having a look for this issue of Pix then. But looking through the archive, sadly, that particular issue is not available. What a pity. So the next item we have comes from the Grenfell Record and Lachlan District Advertiser. Just rolls off the tongue. Dated Thursday the 24th of September 1931. People want to be fooled. Fleshy ghosts, all a fake. When ghosts appear at my seances, they are Nino Piccararo in the flesh. Thus, spiritualism received a telling blow when the medium who is said to have deceived Sir Arthur Conan Doyle confesses that all his seeming supernatural accomplishments were pure deception, sleight of hand tricks. I've never seen a ghost, and I don't believe anyone else has ever seen one, he told reporters of the New York Times. I'm sick and tired of giving seances and having others reap the profits. Saying that people want to be fooled, Piccararo admitted that he had made his living by fake seances for 11 years. But from now on, he would confine himself to painting, acting, and writing for a livelihood. Now, I might just break off here for a moment and look into who this Nino Piccararo was exactly. And a quick look at Wikipedia. Let's see. Nino Piccararo, 1899 to 1973, was an Italian spiritualist medium who was exposed as a fraud. And the accompanying image here has him sitting in a chair, bound up by lots of ropes, which is reminiscent of some of the spiritualist acts at seances where they say that their hands are tied to the table or the chair so they can't possibly be doing any shenanigans in the dark. Piccararo from Naples, it says, worked as a spiritualist medium, and he impressed people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle by making musical instruments played during seances. Typical trick, I think. He was tested by members of the Scientific American in 1923, and it says he impressed some of the committee members who considered the phenomena genuine. However, O.D. Munn, the publisher of Scientific American, suspected that he had freed his hand to play the instruments. The magician Harry Houdini had not been informed of the test sessions, but managed to get to the fourth seance. Houdini suggested that Piccararo was an escape artist who freed himself from the rope that bound him to the chair. Before the seance, Houdini had cut the rope into shorter pieces and tied Piccararo to the chair. Because of the tight control, no phenomena occurred. Well, there you go. In 1931, Piccararo confessed his fraud in a newspaper interview. Later in life, he became an artist. How about that? I did not know about this guy, his story. Well, let's go back to our Trove article and pick that up where we left off. And indeed, of course, this article is from 1931. 8 years ago, it is recalled, when the rage for spiritualism was at its height and sorrowing people were seeking consolation by thinking to communicate with the dead, Piccararo attracted wide attention for appearing as a claimant for the prize of $2,500 offered by a scientific magazine to any medium who could produce authentic phenomena. Well, that's interesting. That's like the Randy $1 million prize or the $100,000 prize here in Australia. For a time, a committee of distinguished scientists, named by the magazine, seemed much impressed by his demonstrations. Recently, however, he was reported less successful, and 3 years ago his attempt to materialize the spirit of Houdini, master of all magicians and implacable foe of the spiritualists, failed so significantly that his own manager pronounced the séance a terrible frost. Deceived Conan Doyle. Yet Piccararo is reputed to have deceived the creator of Sherlock Holmes, greatest of all fictional detectives. Conan Doyle was a firm believer in spiritualism, and its converts today include the famous scientist Sir Oliver Lodge, who is reported to have held communications with his son, killed in action in the World War. Whether Piccararo's confession will halt the sorrowful march to the darkened dens of the mediums is purely a matter of conjecture. but many agree that it is a staggering blow to the cult. Piccardo repeated an old opinion, the Philadelphia Evening Public Ledger reminds us, when he said that people want to be fooled. And to this, Philadelphia observes, "If it is more serious and a little sad that such credulity is so often inspired by uncertainty, unhappiness, and a profound need for some assurance in facing the trials and problems of life. The same sense of need leads many just now to consult with the cheapest sort of tricksters, professed readers of the stars, palms, and crystals, and others who claim to know by mystic means the incalculable events that are yet to come. If anyone were granted spiritual vision or second sight, it would be nearly incredible that he should choose to make profit by such an endowment, either on the grand scale or in the cheaper fashion of the back street fortune-teller or vaudeville performer. And the public might be fortified against such exploitation by remembering the sound advice of Horace. Quote, 'Cease to inquire what the future has in store, and take as a gift whatever the day brings forth.' End quote. It is axiomatic, points out another writer, that supernatural causes must not be sought over what can be produced by natural means. Only when science and reason fail may spirit causes properly be assumed or even looked at. Yet, granted, a reasonably clever man has no scruples about playing such tricks, observes the Baltimore Sun, it will not be very hard for him to take in completely a much more intelligent man who, for some deep personal reasons, wants terribly to believe. But belief is a very risky, dangerous thing to play around with. Even the deliberate charlatan never knows just how far it can go and what it can do, where it begins and ends, what it will produce and fail to produce, even the magician himself. Nino Piccardo wants credit for his own show. It is a question whether he will ever be without ghosts, whether he will be able to be without them. At the same time, observes the Brooklyn Eagle, not all sane men and women are absolute believers. Nearly all are skeptics, and they need not regard the confession of Piccardo as anything conclusive against the doctrine of spiritualism. Now the next entry we have comes a year later from the Freeman's Journal in Sydney, published on the 30th of June 1932. Priest exposes fake mediums. To support his contention that spiritualistic mediums resort to conjuring and trickery to obtain mystifying or weird effects, the Reverend Albert Knapp, OP, a skillful conjurer and a member of the Magic Circle, recently gave a demonstration in St. Salvator's Hall, Lewisham, England, which completely baffled a large audience. He then explained how the tricks were done. Oh, as an aside, and I've said this before, wow, I would have loved to have been there on that occasion. Father Knapp, the London Universe states, made spooks flit about the stage in a Stygian darkness, and just incidentally, Stygian refers to the river Styx of mythology, and conjured up eerie, white, and nebulous forms, some crooning, others wailing. They were all the world like the traditional phantoms of fiction, and one would not have been surprised to see a ghost in clanking chains, or Sir Walter Raleigh walking about with his head under his arm. Father Knapp started the performance by asking his medium, a tall young lady in the guise of a Japanese, to hold to her brow envelopes containing slips of paper on which were questions written by members of the audience. This she did, standing in the centre of the aisle of the hall, while Father Knapp sat at a table in the centre of the stage. Father Knapp then read aloud appropriate answers to all the questions, selected at random from a basket. Spirit hand. In the next trick, a cardboard spirit hand moved about a blackboard on which was written the alphabet and spelt out names given by members of the audience. The spirits then wrote on paper, and the medium, blindfolded, told the number of pips on a number of cards selected by one of the crowd. Returning from an outside passage, in which she stood under the guard of 2 volunteer witnesses, the young Japanese lady stated correctly the number of coins in a purse. Not a sound was made by the conjurer or audience when she re-entered the room. Then came the most baffling trick of the evening. 4 volunteers from the audience tied the medium's hands behind her back to a chair with strips of calico and sealed the knots and placed a ring between her teeth. Screens were placed about her, so it was obvious she could have no help from any other person, and then the screens were whisked away and the medium was seen sitting bound with the knots still sealed and the ring on one of her fingers. Through the medium, the spirits worked feverishly behind the screens. Feverishly, for each trick took less than a minute. Poured milk from a jug into a glass, lit a candle, struck knives into a numbered board on numbers called by the audience, played a tin whistle, and banged a cymbal. In his address before the performance, Father Knapp said,
"Spiritualism is one of the most important questions of modern times, and sets before souls painful problems. Its adepts are counted in thousands. I might almost say millions, in every country of the world. Its successes proves at least one thing, the need for the soul of belief in the beyond, in another world, in survivorship, or, to use the real world, in immortality."
Used as means to deceive.
Unhappily, men and women without conscience make use of this need to deceive and seduce souls and to make money. Sorrowful relations seize with avidity the slightest word which may indicate, even from afar, that the spirit, or rather the soul they seek, is in communication with them. The phenomena which take place at seances are simply conjuring tricks. Some of these tricks are very crude. Some are very clever. But I repeat it, they are tricks. We conjurers know them and can reproduce them. Today all seances are more or less alike. At many of them, alas, they try to make of spiritualism a religion. Hymns are sung and prayers are said. That is sacrilege. All great conjurers will tell you, with Houdini, that they have never seen any supernatural in the spirit seances, nor anything that could convince them that it is possible to communicate with the dead.
The meeting was held under the auspices of the Southwark branch of the Catholic Evidence Guild. Wow, there's a lot to think about there. I still would have loved to have been in the audience to see that performance. It just sounds like a ripping night of magic and conjuring. Now, here's a particularly unusual one from the Courier Mail, Brisbane, dated the 18th of October 1945. Women prisoners run fake seance. London, October 17. Special. Women prisoners posing as mediums have been holding seances in Holloway Jail, says the Daily Mail. They have been collecting 1 and 1, which I assume stands for 1 shilling and 1 penny, weekly comfort money from other prisoners on the pretext of being able to receive messages from the dead. One bereaved prisoner was mentally deranged by the messages. The authorities have now broken up the seances in the jail, where conditions last week were described as bedlam by Mr. W.J. Brown, MP, who is pressing the Home Secretary, Mr. Chuta Eid, to appoint a committee of inquiry. Seances in jail. And finally, we do have something from the Pix magazine, dated the 29th of July 1950. And it's quite something. I will link to this specific article in this week's show notes because the accompanying photographs are just amazing. I'll try to explain them in a moment. Spiritualism. Is levitation a fake? Danish medium takes unique pictures to show spirits at play in darkened room. For many years, scientists, spiritualists, churchmen and laymen have been arguing the pros and cons of spiritualism. But the big question still remains unanswered. Are spiritualism and levitation faked, or are they genuine supernormal phenomena? And just stopping quickly, I've never seen that word before, supernormal. That's a new one on me. Paranormal, supernatural, supernormal? Most skeptics refuse to acknowledge existence of supernatural forces. They back their argument with the claim that sufficient material evidence has never been produced. They ridicule the idea that spirits of the dead can speak, that supernormal forces can lift tables or slap faces of human. Such demonstrations are faked, they say. But Danish photographer and medium Sven Turek claims to have pictorial evidence published on these pages of levitation. The mystic rising of objects in the air. The pictures look convincing. Turek explains that he is not a spiritualist, that the forces he employs are not connected with the spirits of dead people. He says,
I am skeptical when mediums introduce the forces and give their names. My mind won't be changed until one of these so-called spirits changes it for me. In my opinion, the forces are powers in the subconscious minds of people, powers which are released under certain circumstances. We see and hear what happens, but as far as the background of these mystic forces is concerned, we know practically nothing. And voice. With a specially selected team of 12 mediums, Turek has been conducting seances for 14 years. Strange things happen. In the darkened room, heavy tables suddenly leap into the air. Furniture is thrown about. Clothing is ripped off people. Guests are mysteriously hurled on top of tables.
I'll pause here briefly and try to describe the first photograph on the page, which is a huge photograph taking up most of the page. We have a lady and a man next to each other dressed appropriately in 1950 style clothing, and what appears to be a table or a chair, it's hard to say, mid-flight in front of them, sort of zooming up towards the ceiling, and their arms are extended as if they're trying to hold it or stop it or touch it or something like that. It's very strange. And the accompanying caption reads, Danish mediums jump back as a table mysteriously rises in mid-air. And page after page are similar photographs of tables flying about the room with people trying to stop them or touch them or something like that. And page after page of bizarre photographs of people appearing to leap through the air, sort of taken mid-leap. And it's just bizarre. It's crazy. It's, to be frank, it's quite comical. I think they had a very good time doing this story. The story goes on. Infrared lamps, noiseless cameras record strange manifestation. Turek records the phenomena with a battery of cameras set up in a darkened room and working simultaneously. Infrared ray lamps automatically light as soon as something happens. Turek says his cameras are fitted with silencers to prevent their noises disturbing the manifestations. Turek's mediums are sincere students of levitation. They claim to be able to command the mystic forces to appear every half minute. Phenomena they produce are the same as those claimed by spiritualists: voices, tapping, sound of steps, and moving furniture. Turek says he has seen a medium lifted up and undressed in less than a minute. What sort of party is this? His clothes were swept up to the ceiling and then slowly floated down. I think Maynard might have been at that party, come to think of it. One medium floated horizontally, or in his chair, near the ceiling for several minutes. Turek adds,
At one time the seances became so rough that my Copenhagen laboratory was completely wrecked. Neighbours became impatient when heavy furniture consistently crashed across the room. So we stopped the experiments. Even then the phenomena didn't stop. I was thrown out of bed. Lights were suddenly switched on, and strange, shapeless hands touched me.
And another caption on one of the other photographs with people in strange positions around a table. I think they're hamming it up for the camera, quite frankly. Mediums madly scramble out of the way as every movable piece of furniture in the room starts sliding. Man on the table was dumped there by spirits. Turek has written a book on the spiritualist world, says there is a connection between mentality of mediums and types of phenomena. And again, that comes from the Pix magazine, dated the 29th of July 1950. And I think this caption really gives a true sense of what's going on. Striptease at a seance. A medium's trousers are torn from him, then rise and float near the ceiling. They won't come back to him until they're ready. Well, there you go. What a wonderful way to round off this segment on Trove, mediums and seances. And looking at those photographs again and again, those people are having a great time. What a bunch of Danish hams they really are. They're just hamming it up for the fun of the story, I think. And you too can ham it up and have all sorts of fun by visiting Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, typing in your search, having a look, and you'll never know what you'll find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people who really show their support for the Skeptic Zone by Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. And in the last week, we have some new Patreons, so thank you to those people very much. I'll be in touch with you soon to thank you personally. Maybe Maud the cat will too. Where's she gone? She's behind the curtains. Oh, there she is. She's settled down on the desk here. She's looking at me. Do you want to edit the show next week? Let's see. And speaking of next week we're going to give you the full report about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, read by me and Adrian Hill. And you can find out the methodology, the history, all sorts of things about this monumental undertaking. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders and Maud the cat. Oh, I heard a little meow there. Yes? Do you want to say a quick meow? No, nothing. Signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.